What I'm trying to do today is to go through these presentations to arrive to a title called China Needs Netherlands. On November 15th, Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, was invited to China, visiting Beijing. This is 3 days after the closing of the third plenary session of the 18th Communist Party. It was a very important meeting, and the Prime Minister of Netherlands was invited as the first Prime Minister in the world to visit China. Why was that? Because China is in a very big transition. This big transition is going to change China today and then also change the world. And I believe this is going to make China as an engine in economic growth in the next 10 and 15 years again. Prime Minister of Netherlands was invited because I believe China needs Netherlands in basically agriculture and agrarian urbanization. We're going to talk about this today. What I'm going to do is I'm going to structure my speech into 6 parts. I'll introduce a little bit about us as a group, and then also Chic Foods is a company division that the Chic Group invested in. And then it gets into why UNESCO Chic Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization Program. They are strategically linked, and then we'll get into why this is important dealing with the 3 rural issues in China. That's the root problem of all the issues in China today. And it'll also talk about the challenges in China. These challenges is coming from the globalization as well as urbanization. The trend is still going on, especially on the food demand and supply imbalance, which creates such a great opportunity for Netherlands. So then I will get into the business opportunities and my recommendations to Netherlands. And then we'll talk a little bit about Chic Group and Wageningen University at work for you. This is our headquarters in Shanghai. Chic Group is a company that is focusing on investment. I'm not going to read through all the things that's here. Things important to understand is we are a company that is doing investments, is very much invested in food and agriculture, home and garden, and medical equipment, supply chain management solution and execution, as well as this Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization. We are a company positioned as a SIMIS company. SIMIS company is solution, investment, management, innovation, and a service. We tend to look at issues and problems, and then we come up with a solution, whatever it is, in terms of product or service or supply chain or even a business model to develop a country. I came to China about 20 years ago. I was born and raised in China. I was doing business in the United States in San Francisco. It was a quite enjoyable life in San Francisco about 20 years ago. But then a group of angel investors approached me and said that, Edward, you need to go back to China because you were raised and born in China. You know China. Why don't you go back and we will back you up with anything you want to do. Then just tell us and then we will fund you with the money. So it's about 20 years ago, I returned back to China. We invested in logistic business, textile, fashion, food and ag, medical, and today now we are getting into home and garden as well as Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization, which is a very big project to take on. Chic Foods is a division that we invested alongside with all the business that we started about 20 years ago. This business is in the business of a B2B business that we serve our strategic clients all over the world, including Del Monte, Coca-Cola, and Heinz. Our business is a B2B model. We only pick up the best brand to serve and partner with in the world. So you look at Del Monte alone in the United States, that this is a company that we're shipping about 10,000 containers a year to this customer. But of course today, our customer base is beyond the United States. It's being all over the world. Innovation is a very important part, the DNA of the company. The reason that we survived is very much to do with the innovation. It's always trying to create a product service that is value added, differentiated to our customer and our customer, which is the consumer in globally. Sustainability is another thing that is very important to us, that we've been always looking at how can we become sustainable, to become a company that if we compete in the marketplace, our product and our service, our business model is not easy to be copied by our competitors in China, especially when you come to China. This is something you worry about being copied. Superior and consistent quality is another very important factor for us to compete with. We've been very good at that. I've been saying that to produce 1 cup or 100 cup or 1 million cup is easy, but to produce 1 billion cup with the same consistent quality is not easy. Operational excellence and supply chain visibility, all of these are the value propositions of the company of Chic Foods today, even though that we are now stretching into agriculture, stretching into R&D and globalization with branding as well. Because of the success that we had, we made Chinese canned mandarin oranges, and by that time it was the canned mandarin oranges. Today we call it processed mandarin oranges. We made the position in China about 20 years ago was only 5% of the market, total market share in the global space. Today we led that industry into 85% of our market share in the global space. Because of that reason, we also helped with a lot of Chinese farmers and Chinese peasants to get out of poverty. Then the government in China asked us to come up with a solution to deal with the agrarian side. The slides that I saw from Heinz today in the morning that I went through, I can felt that this country, Netherlands, is a country that's been going through a very good revolutionary transition from agrarian rural area to agrarian urbanization. This is what China is going after. And we then asked by the Chinese government to come up with a solution to deal with the poor rural area with the 3 rural issues that's in place. So then the project of integrating the rural development with urbanization came to being. So the reason this UNESCO endorsed is because when UNESCO found out this project and found that this is a project because this is all built up under the concept of sustainable development. So then UNESCO sent a big team to China, to Chongqing, and looked around what's going on with the project and the design of the project, and they found that this is a project should be a demonstration for the rest of the world. So today, this project is called the Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization. The reason Biosphere this Biosphere is a label coming out from UNESCO. So this strategic partnership between UNESCO and the Chic Group for development of a sustainability and a balance between the man and the biosphere was in place. It's a very high level of concept. It's very macro. But what is this is we are looking at a project, these bio projects to have a new way of urbanization. This new way of urbanization is to link together with the rural development. We're going to develop and integrate the rural side to close the gap in between the city and the rural area, to close the gap between the poor and the rich, and also the regions which were very well developed in the eastern side, coastal area of China, as well as then the inland of China today. The location of the project is in Banan district in Chongqing, which is a physical place. Chongqing is like the Chicago in this is Chongqing, very much like a Chicago of the United States. This inland city is a city that is booming, and the city gave us about 100,000 acres of land to be worked on for the concept of this Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization project. Biosphere Integrated Rural Urbanization is a project that follows 2 logic lines. One logic line is looking at farm to table of a supply chain to be put in place, where that you see that end-to-end supply chain is an industry of agribusiness and agribusiness to be brought in, I can feel that this region is a typical, very typical example of agrarian urbanization that I would like to refer to, where I see that in this region that farm to table and technologies all around agribusiness and agriculture is already being built up. This is what China can learn from Netherlands. So this agribusiness intensive assembly park is a park in this 100,000 acres of land that we're putting of agriculture, crop, poultry, horticulture, food processing, fruits, vegetables, meat, and related services in wholesale market, logistics park, and with produce, food, and warehousing and logistics. So it's a total supply chain to be put in. While on the other side is urbanization, that we're building up a new lifestyle of a community, that education is the anchor, that I always believe for a city to become vibrant, talent is very important. It is the talent which changes the city. It's the talent in the city, creating ideas, creating innovation in place, is to drive a city to be vibrant. So education, universities like Wageningen University or UC Davis is a university that we're looking at to bring into a place. My belief, the reason California has been so much advanced in agriculture and agribusiness, why Netherlands is so much advanced, the reason I believe is a lot to do with the Wageningen University. It's a lot to do with the institute. It's a lot to do with the entrepreneurs that sitting here, that are working together. Then you look at the triangle of knowledge institutes, companies and entrepreneurs, and of course the government to work together to make an agrarian urbanism to happen. So this is why on this line on the left side is education, universities, colleges, vocational schools, bilingual K-12 schools. And then also at a workplace that you see office park, R&D centers, leisure sports centers, and agritourism, township, civic centers, and shopping centers. If you have these two lines together, they are complementary, which builds up a new city or new lifestyle. If you take a look at Beijing today, Beijing is so crowded. Beijing is the capital city of China. With over 60 million people in one city. 60 million people in one city. Every worker in Beijing at least wastes about 3 hours a day by traveling on the road. If you have ever visited in Beijing, that you realize this is a sick city. Why this is a sick city? If you take 3 hours a day, 3 hours effective time in the day, multiple 5 days a week, and then 52 weeks, then you understand that people living in Beijing waste 5 years of their lifetime on the road. This is a sick city. This is not a correct city. And then a PM 2.5 in Beijing used to be 900. And PM 2.5 here is about 40. PM 2.5 900, meaning that people living in Beijing is inhaling every day dangerous, poisonous air. That's not the way that China should go. So this new urbanization, new lifestyle in place, to have these two lines in place is the way to go. That how do we use the rural area as an area that we can come in with a new lifestyle of urbanization in place. This is something that I see that China has got a lot to learn from Netherlands. This is something that China has got to learn from California and Bay Area. Along that, you see that this line of talents, education is so important because these two lines, both two lines, has got issues. The issues is all very much based on the talents that China needs. China does not have talents today in agribusiness today. The reason is because China has never have any agriculture in the past. When I use agriculture, I hope you understand when I say agriculture, agriculture is industry where science and technology can be applied. But the agriculture in China is not a sector that science and technology can be applied. The reason is because Chinese agriculture is very much based on a small-scale, individual small-scale farming. Average farm size in China is about 1/6 of an acre. Average farm size in the United States is about 166 acres. There are about 229 million Chinese contracted peasants in place doing farming. Can you believe that there is any technology that you have here can be applied in China? No. This is why China, in the past 30 years, that I believe the agriculture is totally different. The agriculture that you are talking about is totally different from the agriculture in China. Because there is no technology-based large-scale farming in place. There is no need for the talent to be developed for that industry. If there is no need for the talent to be developed, the schools in China has never been developing talents for agriculture. So this is why the second most important bottleneck in China to develop agriculture and agribusiness is the talent. That's where Netherlands can offer. This BIRA project is dealing with the issues of the three rural factor issues in China. First one is the peasants, second one is the agriculture, third one is declining village. We're looking at how can we transform the 229 million Chinese households farming in the Chinese individual small-scale farming system throughout China. How can we transform that into a technology-based larger scale is related to Netherlands, or large scale is related to California, agriculture. Highly intensive use of labor, water, and fertilizers. A lot of pesticide to be put in place. This is also creating issues in China on pollution. The biggest sector pollutes China today is agriculture. And you may not realize that. You may say that the city is the place that pollution is the most. Agriculture in China is the biggest source of pollution. Now, all of these are the issues. I will come back that this is the root problem. And it is also we're looking at how do we transform individual peasants. These are 229 million peasants. How do we transform them into professional farmers, workers? By transforming that, we're looking at the future farmers won't be the peasants today. The future farmers will be entrepreneurs, will be ranch owners, will be totally a change from today's 229 million to about 3% of the population like you do here or United States. Transforming the declining village, which is about 1/4 of the village today, is hollow in China because of the dual economy. In the last 30 years of the time, China has been developing itself very fast, but it's developing very much based on the dual economy. The dual economy is the economy absorbing the rural labors to industrialization and urbanization, which is making the villages in China hollowing. It's about 1/4 of the village in China today is hollowing. The village is declining. The people living in the village are very old. Aging problem is coming in. So we're looking at how can we convert this declining village into an integrated rural urban city in the rural area. I can see that this area is very typical of this an example. Everything should be under the sustainability approach and framework, which is provided by UNESCO, Man of the Biosphere, which is developing the economy together with the social balance as well as the environment protection. This is the endorsement from Director General of UNESCO, Irina Bokova, who endorsed the project, becomes the demonstration of the world. I have been working on this project for about 6 years. But then, the third plenary session of the 18th CPC meeting in Beijing made a decision. 70% of the decision was written closely related to the concept that I've been doing in the last 6 years, which is a very good thing to me. And on the other side, that you see that what is a dramatic change from this decision is that very big phenomenon is going to come to China in the next 10 years, as well as becoming an impact to the world, is the releasing of the land from the rural area to be freely in exchange with human capital as well as the monetary capital from the city. Starting from now, the Chinese land is going to be deeded, legally can be treated in the marketplace. In the past, it was not possible. This is becoming such a big force to kick the economy in the next 10 and 15 years. Because I give you a number. There are 200, as I said, there are 229 million peasants in China. Each peasant, on average, owns 2 mu. 2 mu is 1/3 of an acre of land. And each peasant also owns about 1 mu of a farmhouse land. This farmhouse land is having such a low cost and low price today. It's not valuable. But compared to the price of the land in the city, in the center of a big city like Shanghai, this is a million times of a difference. This arbitrage of the value in land is going to kick off a very new engine of economic growth in China for about 40 trillion RMB of investment opportunity. But then at the same time, this is going to pull for the GDP growth of 56 trillion. 56 trillion of RMB of GDP is about the same size of the annual GDP today in China. If you take 10% of these 56 trillion as an incremental GDP growth every year in China, this gives China additional, disregarding the 7.5% low growth in China, another 10% of GDP growth if we are able to put the system in place to make this happen. So this is why this third plenary session in China on November 9th to 12th was a very important meeting. If you would like to understand China more, that is a decision you should read. Now, why is that? Because of the 3 rural issues. But then what is the 3 rural issues? The 3 rural issues, as I said, is the root problem of many problems and challenges today that we face in China. This is why this biosphere integrated rural urbanization becomes so important and is also written in the decision of the third plenary session. The reason it's a root problem, it's very much to do with the size of the farm. It's very much to do with the number of the peasants in China. This causes the challenge today. The challenge today that you all know in China is the food safety. Product grown and processed in China in terms of food is perceived to be unsafe. All the product, all the food, the consumer confidence in the food produced and grown in China is not there anymore. This challenge is coming from the root problem of these 3 rural issues. Food security is an issue. How do we feed? Let's say we said, how do we feed the 9 billion people? Or today, FAO said it's about 11 billion people it's going to be by 2050. In China, China is the major country is going to export inflation to the world. This inflation is good to Netherlands because it will allow Netherlands to export more to China. And another thing is the disparity between rural and urban areas, between the wealth and the poverty. And most peasants today remain poor in China. Per capita income today is less than $1,200 per year. This is a very low income. This low income creates an issue. This tension is in place that you see that if you are in China, that you understand that the government needs to solve this problem And now all of a sudden China is trapped into this middle income trap. The fourth one is agriculture is perfectly competitive market. As you see that there are so many competitors in the marketplace. There are about 229 million peasants. Everybody is growing the same thing, processing the same thing, and they're competing with each other with the same product. And for a company to survive, this company has to lend itself into value-added differentiations in place. Capital is not being invested in the rural area because there is no return on investment today. And lacking of agricultural talents, as I said, is the major bottleneck today. And sustainability, again, air pollution, land pollution, soil pollution, water pollution is the issue today. All of these challenges that you see is facing China. And another thing that you see that the rural and urban income gap remains very wide. And in the last 30 years of the Chinese growth that you see, this dual economy, as I said, has been absorbing a lot of rural laborers from the rural area to the city. But you see up to today, the income in the urban city is still 3 times higher than the rural income. This is going to become continuously a driving force for the rural workers to be absorbed into the city and into the urbanization as well as industrialization, which is a very important factor. This is a picture taken about a year ago. I was in Anhui, and this old gentleman said to me that he was about 65, 75 years old. He would never go back to farming anymore, but then his child, his son, will never be willing to go back to farming. So then I asked him, what are you going to do with the land? He said, when he gets old and he dies, he will return the land to the collectives, because all the land in China belongs to the collectives. You see the problem of the aging. Dedicated workers is over 45 years old, is about 60%. So the question is, who is going to farm in the future in China? If we do not aggregate the land, how is it going to happen? But at the same time, this is a good thing, is because this aging is helping us to aggregate the land, because the land becomes the land to be deserted in the rural area. Now, it all comes from this trigger of urbanization, globalization. Last 30 years of the time that you see the major engine made China to happen with such a high growth of economic growth is very much due to this urbanization. Due to this globalization. Globalization started in Japan in the 1970s, and then it moved to the Four Dragons, and then moved to the Four Tigers. And then finally, in the 21st century, landed in the coastal area of China. But now you see that this globalization move is moving into the inland side of the China, which is Chongqing is a representative city in the inland of China. Manufacturer of the world is the role of China today. That is very much based on the low labor cost in the past. Chinese labor cost was about $3 per day. As I understand, in this country, your labor cost, good labor, of course, is a little bit difference between these two labors. Your labor is about $60 per hour. $60 per hour versus $3 per day. This is the reason why in the last 30 years, made China successful, made China becoming a global player as a manufacturer of the world. Everything is due to the labor costs in there. The labor in the material, the labor in processing, labor in the packaging material, labor in logistics, labor in every component of the cost breakdown made China today as the second largest GDP in the world. Globalization will still move on, but China will remain as the manufacturer of the world because China built up its good pace. But this globalization is the trigger. The trigger triggered urbanization and industrialization. Globalization is a pull, made industrialization to happen. But then at the same time, this industrialization made urban population to grow dramatically. And you see from 1990 to 2012, the growth of the urban population. Now, the reason we're talking about urban population is because we are talking about consumerism. We're talking about the people who can consume products, not living in the rural area, but living in the cities. More than doubled in this period of time. But look at Netherlands, from 10 to 14, total euro, not much change. What this tells you? This tells you that China is becoming a consuming country. No longer China is the country export product anymore. In the next 30 years, China is going to become a consuming country, is a consumer, which will take more product from the world, of course, at the same time exporting inflation to the world place. This urbanization is a trigger that you see that what's going to happen is in the next 15 years, going forward, there are another 385 million people will be migrated from the rural area to the city. 385 million people, which is the size of the United States total population, is more than that. This is going to kick in a huge consumption demand into the world market because China does not have the capacity to grow its own food. Over the next 2 decades, the migration will play such an important role that accounts for 70% of the new urban residents to put in place. This process of migration and urbanization, fueled by governmental policies, will drive the growth of the consumer markets by widening the affordability and ability of the goods. This is very important to Netherlands. This gives opportunity to Netherlands to ship more products to China because China cannot take care of by itself. It's too fast to come, especially when the third plenary session, when the decision is made in there, this urbanization process will be fastened. You see that China has already come to the conversion that by 2012, the urban population is already surpassing the rural population, that you see that these two lines is happening dramatically. This creates opportunities. Food consumption is very much changed nowadays because of the urbanization. Dietary change is along with the migration from the rural area to the city. The people living in the city are looking for protein-based product, which is meat, dairy product, instead of grains. That you see that the change in there on the fruit, grain is going down, and on the pork, on the poultry, and fish, milk is going up. So urbanization will become a key driver of changing the consumer diet. The reason I said China is not able to handle this, not able to feed its own people with its own land, is because the arable land in China per capita is very similar to what is here in Netherlands. The arable land in China is about 0.08 hectares per capita, while in the United States it's about 0.51. This is about 6-7 times the difference. But on the other side, I need you to understand that you see that the arable land in China total is about 107 times more than Netherlands. If you put these two numbers together, what this tells you? This tells you, please, China needs you, needs Netherlands, needs your talent, needs your technology to come to China to help China to become another Netherlands. But then, together, we will build up a very good value together. On the other side, you see why I said that China needs Netherlands. If you look at these, the agriculture total productivity is so different. Netherlands productivity, value added per worker, which means productivity, and the total factor productivity of agriculture, is about 84 times of China. 84 times, meaning this is low-hanging fruit, isn't it? You go after low-hanging foods, your return on investment, what do you think? So the imbalance of the food supply and demand is the issue. It's coming. Why it's coming? You look at this, that these globalization is a trigger, is causing industrialization and urbanization, both sides. On one side, this urbanization is making migration. More people from the rural area to the city. It's growing the city population. With the dietary change, again, the demand is going up on the food. And then on the other side is the middle class growth. Today, middle class in China is about 300 to 400 million people. Wealth creation, dietary upgrades, more protein-based product in China, meaning more grain, meaning more corn and soybean to be put into the system, which you know better than me. More corn and soybean in place, but the arable land per capita is limited. How can China feed by itself? And then on the other side, the GDP still continues to grow. An alternative use is the use of the food raw material for the fuel and the livestock, food stock. It's very stupid to do this. And it was happening, it's also happening in China. This is driving up the domestic consumption. And with this domestic consumption, you see the demand on the food is going up. But while on the other side, you see that urbanization is also making the land in the rural land is shrinking because more land is taken by the city. Single-family, small-scale farming is limiting us because the yield is too low. The corn yield in China is about half of here. The soybean yield is about 40% of Netherlands. And your yield is double per acre than China because of this issue of a single-family, small-scale farming. And as you see that the rural worker force has been reduced and is continuously being in reduction. Arable land is limited. Soil problems, water contamination is in place. Infrastructure has been always an issue in China for agriculture. Underinvestment in agribusinesses, the climate changes, all of these is put together, you see that the supply on the safe food remains the same or going down. In my home, we have 2 maids. Each maid is making about $1,000 per month. This maid used to be farming in the farm field. Now she's moving to the city. She's fed by the family like us. She's asking for food and we feed them. This increases the demand of the food. But at the same time, when she left her countryside, she's not farming anymore. Her land is deserted. So on the supply side is going down. So supply is going down and remain the same while demand is going up. Food security becomes a huge issue in China. This unbalance of supply and demand is creating an issue of food security. On the other side, of course, we can talk about the food safety issue. It's also due to these 229 million individual peasants is in place, which is very hard to control, the food safety system in the whole value chain. But then on the other side, you see, this is demanding and crying for agriculture reform. The agriculture in China has to move to a technology-based larger-scale farming or technology-based large-scale farming. That's the only way to solve the problem in China on food security. But then at the same time, you see, opportunity comes from these problems. Now we are getting into the opportunities. What is good for Netherlands? I think Netherlands can trade more with China. I think Netherlands can export more to China in order to solve the Chinese food security and the food safety problem. As long as today, Netherlands companies can explain why your product is safe, as long as today that you can show to the Chinese consumers that your product is safe, you are able to sell a higher price in China for the food produced here. So you will be able to export your food to China based on the food safety system that you have built up, as long as based on the food security issue that are coming in. Produce export to China on food safety, unique varieties, offering better value propositions such as taste, texture, aroma, is another way to go. That you have such a great technology. That's why I said today that this country, when I after visited Hendrix today in the morning, I felt my takeaway is that this country, in agribusiness and agriculture, you have an overcapacity of R&D, overcapacity of technology, overcapacity, overinvestment in technology, where China is lacking. So match these two together, you see there's a great opportunity for you to go to China and trade with China more. And why not invest into China? Why don't you come to China, bring your technology, bring your talent, come in to teach China how to farm? Chinese agriculture, as I said, is about 100 years behind of the Netherlands. You have so much to offer to China. By offering these, there is a price. The price is the profit that you can make in China. Modern farming in China should start with effective education and knowledge transfer and consultation service. This is why that you see that you can come in with the consultant service. If you say that I don't want to invest because there's so much risk and I don't know the country, can you just travel to China? Somebody's going to pay for your ticket. And you come back. I guarantee you, your return on your ticket is about 10 times at least each trip. So you have consultation services that you can go to China. So what I recommend you to do is, Netherlands, please, you need to think out of the box. You need to think out of the box and act out of the box. When I say think out of the box, this box is the Netherlands. When I say that you need to act out of the box, this box is Europe. I understand that you ship 70% of your production to Europe and 30% of your production capacity is covering the world. But on the other side, you have about 30% of overcapacity in place. Can you fill your overcapacity by shipping more to China while China needs your product? Please think out of the box of Netherlands and act out of the box of Europe. Wageningen University and Chic is forming a collaboration together that we are building up this center in Shanghai to facilitate companies from Netherlands and Europe to go to China. That this center is offering talent training towards the Chinese entrepreneurs, ranch owners in the future, or a joint venture that we see that is going to happen more and more in the future. China Accelerator is an engine that we are creating as a platform to bridge selected global companies, say from Netherlands, which has got intellectual properties or talent, to come with the trade secrets, join force together with a Chinese company who understand and compete very successfully in China as a Chinese company. We would like to matchmake them and then become a joint venture. The success rates of this joint venture with both sides, with the technology, with also the know-how of China market, is going to be much higher than the Chinese company for us to invest in. Or you look at the Netherlands company come to China, I feel that because if you don't understand China, you really need a partner. You come to China by your own, the success rate, in my mind, is not going to be high because China is wild, wild east. Another thing that we are looking at is creating this Netherlands center. We would like to create this platform in a way that becomes a hub to facilitate product and service to be sold in China, product and service to be traded in China, as well as we would like to see that how can we bring you to China and hold your hands to become successful. So the Netherlands Center is a center at service to you. Please, if you have any demand that you can come back to us or come back to ZLTO, that we hope that we can have a collaboration with ZLTO in a way that we can facilitate your successes coming to China. CIBS, UNESCO, Chic, Third China International Agribusiness Forum is a forum that we are sponsoring every year in China, which is linking the global companies and the global sources all together in China to talk about China's reform on agriculture and agribusiness. That we are inviting companies like you here to come to China to help China. And next year is the year that I'm inviting your Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, to come. I met him in Beijing, so I'm still seeing that how can we inviting him to come in to China, and then along with you to come to China. Next year, May 10th, in Beijing, is the plenary forum. And the next day is the day that we see that we are putting together a program for matchmaking Netherlands companies together with the best Chinese companies together to see that how can we accelerate the China growth on agriculture and agribusiness. This is the announcement from Netherlands, from Wageningen University, and this is the forum to be held in Beijing. Then I would like to welcome you all to come to this forum. And the most important thing is to see that how can we help you to make money in China, make much more money than you are making in Netherlands, because as I said, all of these things, the total productivity is about 84 times. We have a base. Thank you.